So welcome everyone. As I've said, your mic is off and so is your video, but please feel free to communicate with us via the chat. I want to say a big thank you on behalf of my social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens. Your donations have gone towards increasing resilience and inspiring and raising the aspirations of teenagers. If anyone wants to find out more about Rocking Your Teens, you can go to www.rockingyourteens.com. And my colleague Tanya will be typing that URL in the chat as well for you. So my name is Jenny Garrett. I'm an award-winning career coach, author, and leadership trainer. Together with my amazing team, we deliver impactful development to support women and those from ethnically diverse backgrounds to progress in the workplace, as well as supporting all leaders to make inclusion happen. My latest practical and empowering book is Equality versus Equity, Tackling Issues of Race in the Workplace. Find it in all good bookshops. And I think Tanya will also add that in the chat as well. So today we're here to talk about cultural intelligence, CQ for short. And cultural intelligence is the ability to recognize and adapt to cultural differences. Someone who is culturally intelligent is not just aware of diversity, they're able to relate to and, where appropriate, adapt to people of different races, genders, cultures, ages, religions, sexual orientations, political affiliations, socioeconomic backgrounds, and disabilities, etc. The ability to work successfully with people from different backgrounds is a key workplace quality that is needed for the 21st century. It's vital to becoming an effective leader. Now, we're not going to cover every single area today. We're going to share some examples of cultural intelligence from our experience coaching leaders and our personal experience. But just because we don't mention something doesn't mean it's excluded. So do bear with us, and maybe you'll share some of your own examples in the chat as well. I think that because of the demand we've had for this webinar, we really know that this is something that's critical and something that you're all grappling with. So we're really planning to help you take away some real practical tips from today's session. During this session, executive coaches Hira, Martha, Sadia, and Obehi, all listed in the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, a directory which connects corporate organizations with coaches from the global majority or ethnically diverse backgrounds, will discuss how to cultivate cultural intelligence and become that culturally savvy leader. You can find out more about the Diverse Executive Coach Directory from the link that we're going to share in the chat. It's an amazing directory and it's getting a huge demand. Think about the coaching pools in your organization. When you look at the choice you have, is there a range of people from diverse backgrounds, or is there a very limited choice? We endeavor to make sure everyone has a choice. And the choice doesn't have to be someone who's the same background as you. In fact, it can bring challenge into your coaching and into your leading. So what we're going to do in this session is Hira, Martha, Sadia, and Obehi will briefly introduce themselves. I'll start off by asking them some questions, and then we're going to open it up to you for you to share your questions and your reflections. However, you don't have to wait right until the end to add them into the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on it throughout, and my colleague Tanya will be doing so. If you'd like to share on LinkedIn or Twitter, the hashtag is Lead with Cultural Intelligence. And again, my colleague Tanya will add everyone's LinkedIn into the chat so you can connect with everyone now and for the future. So we're going to have a little poll because it's always great to know who is in the room. Just going to open up the poll now. Right, I'm not sure. You may have to do it, Tanya. I'm not sure it's going to work for me. Ah, has it come up now? It's just a little bit slow. Fantastic. So hopefully you can see the poll there. The first is the term cultural intelligence new to you? Yes, no, or not sure? Are you here to help your colleagues have more cultural intelligence, develop your own cultural intelligence, or learn about whether you are culturally intelligent or not? And what role do you play? Are you a senior leader, middle leader, junior colleague, HR role, someone with an HR role, someone with an EDI role, or something else? And if it's something else and you do want to share, feel free to type it into the chat. I like the poll to get up to about 85%, so I'm going to give it a minute for you all to respond. And for anyone just joining us, just letting you know that we're just completing a poll at the moment, so hopefully that will come up on your screen. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, and sharing the results with you, hopefully. You can see that the term cultural intelligence is not new to 66% of you, and new to 26% of you, and 9% of you aren't quite sure. That most of you are here to develop your own cultural intelligence, and some are here to help your colleagues have more cultural intelligence. And 11% of you are wondering whether you're culturally intelligent or not. And lastly, we have mainly people who would class themselves as middle managers, followed by senior managers and other. And also then we have junior and those in an EDI role, and lastly, those from HR roles. So at least we know who's in the room now. Welcome to everyone. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to ask our wonderful coaches to introduce themselves. So I'll start with you, Martha. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, good morning, or I should say good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in today. My name is Martha Cuffey. I'm an executive coach and also team leadership development. I'm passionate about transformation and using the body as a way to do that so that we can kind of shed those unnecessary loads that keep us actually from connecting more. And that's part of what we're going to really be discussing today. That's at the heart of it. And one of my colleagues, Sadia, often talks about the rucksack we carry, right? And so this is part of it, really. You know, we're here to help you unload things around cultural intelligence today. So I'm glad to be here and hope to share more as the session goes on.
Were you on mute, Jenny?
Thanks so much, Martha. Obehi, would you like to introduce yourself? Can you hear me, Obehi? Oh, you're on mute now. Can you not unmute? Let's have a look. Sorry about that. You should be able to unmute now.
There we go. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Obehi. I am a psychologist and executive coach and a cultural change consultant. I work with a lot of senior HR and business leaders to implement evidence-based strategies for improving well-being and productivity in the workplace. I have a previous experience in managing multidisciplinary clinical teams and multicultural teams, so I've often used that skill to help leaders and their diverse teams to be able to thrive in the workplace and have some sort of harmony. I've worked with organizations like Allianz, Michael Page, and the NHS. I co-host an award-winning podcast called The Wellbeing Rebellion, and I'm a flat white drinker and a hearing aid wearer.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's great. And Hira.
Hi, so I'm Hira Ali, and I'm an executive coach, leadership development specialist. and a speaker. I'm also founder of Advancing Your Potential, where we champion allyship programs, inclusive talent management initiatives, intersectionality, intercultural intelligence. And I'm also the author of 2 books, Her Way to the Top, A Guide to Smashing the Glass Ceiling, which has its 5th book anniversary today, by the way. And the second book is called Her Allies, A Practical Toolkit to Help Men Lead Through Advocacy. And I'm really pleased to be here.
Oh, thank you, and congratulations on your
Thank you.
book anniversary. Sadia.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sadia Salam. I'm an executive coach, a leadership trainer, and a recovering lawyer. And I now get to spend my time coaching amazing senior women in corporate organizations, and in particular women of color, to really help them lead in a way that works for them and their organizations. And I do a lot of work, as Martha said, on unpacking the invisible rucksack that we often carry to the top with us, and that kind of weighs us down. So it's looking at how we take that off, and all the gifts inside it, actually, a lot of gifts. And I also help organizations to attract and retain the amazing talent that's out there.
Perfect. Thank you. What a wonderful, wonderful panel you can see we have here. You are in for a treat. So I'm going to jump into the first question. Please, can you share examples of how cultural intelligence has impacted your clients or yourself positively or negatively, and why that matters? Yeah, why does it matter? And I'm going to start with you, Hira.
Right. So I do have lots of examples, but I'm going to try and summarize the examples. So for me, it was a bit of a cultural shock, because I was born in Pakistan, and then I was raised in Pakistan. Then I moved to UAE, where I was there for 7 years, and then I moved to London. So growing up in Pakistan, I wasn't accustomed to addressing older and senior individuals by their first names. And we would often use the term sahib or sahiba back at work. So when I moved to London, everybody was addressing people by their first name. And I used to really struggle and often awkwardly, shift between calling people sir or Mr. And then also personally, I think back in Pakistan, everybody used to call, my parents' friends were called uncle and auntie. And I remember the shock. I was momentarily, I froze when my son's friend called me Hira. And I was like, what? Did you really just call my name? So small examples like that. But also, I think in South Asian backgrounds, one thing which a lot of people struggle with is the inclination to view older men authority as fatherly figures. And there's this concept of respect. And in Urdu, we call this word lihaz, as a result of which you do not challenge people. And that might be seen as lack of confidence. And sometimes it's not, it's just respect. So I think growing out of that is hard. Again, a classic example is arranged marriage versus love marriage. I've also written a piece in The Independent, which shares how sometimes people can view arranged marriage as something which is forced, or love marriage, even though that's not true. Or, coming from collectivist culture, how sometimes, people can tend to look after their parents and grandparents. And I had one of my clients who really struggled because she used to take her grandmother for hospital appointments, and the manager used to get very upset and said, you don't need to do that, your grandmother is fine, let her be independent. And then she had to explain that this is something which I don't do forcefully, this is something which is part of my value system. So all of that. And then finally, self-deprecating humor. British love using self-deprecating humor, and sometimes that can be misinterpreted in various cultures. Or the fact that people in UK are very task oriented, and some cultures people like to focus more on building relationships, or direct communication versus indirect communication. So all of that.
It's a lot. It's a lot that you've given us a lot of examples straight away. And I guess what comes up is something about judgment, about people judging one way to be right and another way to be wrong, and having the cultural intelligence not to jump straight in with that. Obehi, what would you add?
Yep. Okay. No, I thought that's a really good example. One of the first things when I thought about this question, I thought about the positive thing that I got from my work when I worked with a multicultural team. So if you think about it, we did non-profit, working with NHS, so very diverse group of practicing in terms of clinicians, which meant that there was always somebody from Asia, Africa, the American, South America. It was always very melting pot. And one of the most positive things about that with how we use food. If you think about it, how do you start asking questions about where you're from, what's your culture, what do you do there? How do you do it in a way that's empathetic and not sort of it's curiosity basically, as opposed to judgment. And one of the key things I found the most helpful was this bringing food in. We have activities where we just bring whatever food from where you come from, and that would start a whole host of conversations and discussions, which led to how similar people were, or how similar culture nuances and sort of applications of things were, like funeral, for example, how that was similar in cultures compared to others, how much time people had to take away to bury a loved one when they had to go home and we had to cover for 3 weeks, that kind of thing. So that's the first initial thing about that question. And then I remember the story. I get the stories from a GP friend of mine, and this is a recent one, so in the last year or so, where my DP friend is British Nigerian, so she's grown up in Nigeria, but she studied and worked here for years, so she gets it. And so there's a level of cultural application this still has from being a native Nigerian. So she had a patient, and her patient, Nigerian, not been in the country for a long time. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3 years. So again, this person had immersed in the British culture, but a majority of how to speak, the kind of language, the phrasing are still by large Nigerian. So there was something about her health, and she referred her to a clinician consultant, something serious. So I want to say something like cancer, but it probably wasn't, but something that required a referral. It took a while when my friend realized, I haven't heard back from that referral. I wonder what happened there. And so she goes and reads the note, follows up, read the note, and the note said that she had rejected treatment. So you can imagine, like, why would she reject this? Is a serious matter. And my friend was thinking, I've told her exactly this was a serious thing. She needed to keep to the appointment. So she called the clinician on duty and said, I can see they said we refused treatment. What did that mean? Then it turned out that actually when they were like, okay, you're going to have to do this surgery or whatever it was, treatment, but of course there's a risk to them. So this risk might result in death or loss of something. You know how, you can imagine how scared this woman would have been. So what she said in the midst of getting all this information was to say, I reject it. I reject it. I reject it. She said it several times. Now, if you're from a culture like Nigeria, it's the Christian word that we shortened, which is I reject it in Jesus' name. He didn't complete the second part. So all the doctors were hearing is I reject it. I reject it. And so it was put on her file, this is rejected treatment. So it's a classic example of not asking further questions, because on the surface, it feels like you've understood it. Actually, it was English. I reject it, which means I reject treatment. So it's only when my friend saw that and realized, as soon as she saw the phrasing, I just knew exactly what that was. She wasn't rejecting treatment. She was just rejecting the idea that she might die from this thing. So it's like, God forbid, or one of those type of expressions. But they didn't follow up with conversation. Now, I can imagine they were busy. It's NHS, things are stressful. So if someone is seemingly rejecting treatment, then what other things could you do? Now, the cultural application of that would be ask more questions about what do you mean? Does that mean you don't want the treatment? Does that mean you don't want the surgery? But that conversation was not had at all. So it took my friend to call back to say that's not what she meant. Now, can you imagine the risk to her? Gone so long without the treatment that was required to be able to save her life. Obviously, she's fine now, but that's the story that came to mind about how bad it could be when we don't consider what a cultural awareness or cultural intelligence, this could save someone's life, is my story. I hope that makes sense for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very powerful example. Thank you so much, Obehi. And Sadia.
So it's Ramadan in 3 weeks. So that's brought up lots of memories for me. And I was employed as a lawyer for just over 20 years, and I've had lots of experiences with Ramadan. and whether there was cultural intelligence or not. So I think on one extreme is when it was Ramadan and there was complete silence in my organization, complete silence. Nobody mentioned it, nobody asked me anything. At that time, I was fasting the full month. But nobody talked about it, and it's such a huge month in the Muslim calendar. It's a really spiritual month. There's lots going on. So I felt I didn't belong. I felt that nobody liked different, that we all had to be the same, because we didn't talk about different. We didn't talk about it. So that's the one extreme where there wasn't cultural intelligence, which meant that I hid it and I felt really unsupported. It's really hard to fast for a whole month and be unsupported, really hard. So that was the hard and heavy side of it, with no cultural intelligence there. And then the complete opposite was where I had a manager who was really interested in it. And she started off with, actually, I know I should know, but I actually know nothing about Ramadan. Will you tell me about it? Brilliant. She showed me that she was interested in me. I felt seen. And we had that conversation. I was able to explain the joy of Ramadan. That yes, the fasting is one part of it and a big part of it, but it's a really spiritual month. It's a month about community, about giving, about charity, and actually a month of self-reflection. So when she had that conversation with me, the heaviness and of being unsupported and being difficult during Ramadan in the working world went, because I knew I could talk to her. I talked about what I needed, what I didn't need. I talked about the fact that some people fast, some people don't. You know, it's not one way of doing things during Ramadan. There's many reasons why people are not in a position to fast. If they're time of the month, if they're pregnant, if they have on medication, if they're traveling, you don't fast in those circumstances. So we were able to have this open conversation, which actually led on to many other open conversations. And we talked about how other people in the team were fasting for other different reasons. And it was a really beautiful openness. And the difference between those two examples of one where it was silence, I felt there was more judgment. I felt that people were thinking I was taking a back seat for a month, where I wasn't as involved in things as I normally am. So much more judgment, more assumptions. Whereas when you talk about it, there's more curiosity. Just as Abohi and Jenny have said, when you've got curiosity, you have less assumptions, less judgment, and a very different space to show up. So actually, when I show up at work during Ramadan, I was much slower and calmer internally, which meant I could see things. I had more ideas. I contributed in a different way to when I contribute every other month, because Ramadan is a pause button. It's a pause button to turn up in a different way, and which everybody benefits from. And so everybody got the benefit of me turning up in the month of Ramadan in a very different way. So that's where you do have cultural intelligence. And another example is when I was hiring globally is eye contact. I used to receive lots of feedback saying, oh, I've got no eye contact from that person and I just don't trust them. And eye contact across the world is very different. Certainly in the Western world, eye contact, really important. If you don't have it, mistrust. But actually in parts of Asia, you're not going to get eye contact straight away, if at all. And so we need to stop. And again, it's that curiosity of why wasn't there eye contact? Exactly as Obehi said. It's different to the way I do things because I like eye contact. But be curious about that difference. And then we have less judgment.
Wonderful examples from the three of you already. Martha, what can you add?
One example I think about is a senior Asian police officer who was facing a difficult decision that was really in the public domain. And one of the people I've learned from is somebody called Dr. Gloria Gordon, who talks about your cultures of origin and your cultures of residence. So obviously this was a story based in the UK. And so there were some male people from the culture of residence who thought basically they could bully her, dominate how the decision was going to be made. And so there was no regard to her values as a leader, what she was thinking. And so in the course of this leadership retreat, she got to see how central her Sikh faith was to how she led, the values that she had, and what decisions she needed to make. So in the face of this kind of really domineering, bullying energy around her, she became very clear about what she needed to do. And subsequently, actually, within the following 6 months during the program, she got 2 promotions. So she really sort of stood central, aware that she was clashing with these people who were not, they weren't at the end of the spectrum that Sadia spoke about. They thought, okay, our way is the highway. but she stood firm and made some really clear decisions for the benefit of all, I should say, not just for her cultural beliefs as well. That's the thing. It roots her, but it enabled her to have compassion and awareness for the enormity of her role.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. I think what I'm hearing as I listen is that when it's done right, when people have cultural intelligence, gosh, it can make such a difference, whether that's actually life or death, or just to your daily experience, and the difference of you inputting ideas, creativity, productivity, and feeling like you belong. And when it's when it's not done well, gosh, there's an issue. And I think culturally, as a country, if we just think about people in the UK, although I know not everyone's based in the UK here today, I think it's something we haven't focused on enough. And so we're often acting from assumptions or ignorance, aren't we, when we're making our judgments. And I just wanted to pick up on the point that was made in the chat, which I think is a really important one, about people who are neurodivergent, because we've talked a lot about ethnicity and maybe gender, etc. But yeah, absolutely, people who are neurodivergent might not always give you eye contact also. And it's important to acknowledge these things. So thank you so much. And I can see some more points in the chat. I'm going to ask the next question, but I am going to come back to your questions and comments. So my next question is, why do we lack cultural intelligence? And what can understanding our own level of cultural intelligence reveal? So, doing that work on ourselves is what I'm asking about. And I'll start with you, Martha.
Yeah, multiple things come to mind. One is, are they aware of and aware of the cost of not having it? So if you are a leader who wants to grow and improve, then you will go, okay, oh, I'm really at the ignorant end of this spectrum right now. What am I going to do to address it? Or are you going to say, I don't care? And, and there's clear examples of both. We've heard examples of those. And also, I mean, I know somebody who'd been in the fire service and one of these officers who took their own life because there was no willingness to change. It's been in reviews, it's been in reports, and that person ended up taking their life because there was not a willingness to broach and move into that space. So it really is it really is the internal culture of the organization and what are the drivers to make that change. Sometimes it has to come from public pressure or from economic pressure, but it's really contextual as well. So there's no straight one answer is what I'm trying to say, but it's important to be aware of what situation are you operating in? Do they want to grow? Do you believe in that leader being willing to wake up and put get the reps in to grow?
Yeah, I mean, I always think about it really personally, like the fact I was born and brought up in the UK. So yeah, this is my culture. But also I have two parents who started life in the Caribbean. And so I also have that Caribbean culture. So what is my culture? And if I'd lived in many different countries, which I haven't, then that would also impact me as well. So there's multiple levels and multiple layers of this, aren't there, to be considered.
Yeah, I'm a linguist, Jenny, so I've always been aware of that need to navigate different spaces in different ways. And that's what's enabled me to grow my career, get jobs abroad, because I was willing to navigate that. And then sometimes just learning a few words in the language opens up a whole door into experiencing that work culture and on a personal and professional level very differently.
Yeah, I would say just, personally, my experience of you as well is you are really interested and curious about people. Yeah, you hold that very strongly, Martha.
I'm a good tourist. Good tourists are curious and respectful.
Yes, but a tourist, sometimes we have to be a tourist in our own land, don't we? Yeah. Hira, what about you? What's your thoughts on this?
I think it's just lack of exposure and awareness. And again, to Martha's point, like I am somebody who has lived in different countries, so I might have picked up different cultural identities from the different places that I've lived in. But sometimes people accept that part of the cultural identity that they're from. Sometimes they reject it. So also not assuming that, you know, this is where they're from, so this is how they are going to act. Of course, culture makes a huge difference, but of course, even the cultural models do come with a lot of disclaimers, right? And I think people have also mentioned this in the chat, but it's important to know that there is a difference between low context environments and high context environments. Communication in UK tends to be more low context, where people are very direct, and everything is understood on face value. But in countries like China or Korea or Saudi Arabia, you know, communication is more layered and nuanced. And I think this whole concept of ethnocentrism versus ethno-relativism, where people think that just because it's my norm, just because people in my circle do it a certain way, then that's the only way, that's the best way. There is a bit of cultural superiority as well, right? And that's why they say the platinum rule is important. So do unto others as they would want as they would want you to do to them, right? It's not the gold, it's the opposite of the golden rule, because we treat people the way we feel we'd like to be treated, but the platinum rule is treat people the way they'd like to be treated. Because sometimes when we're assuming, let me just, you know, assume and treat this person the way I'd like to be treated. But that's, again, my way of the way I want to be treated might be very different. So, you know, not assuming. And I also think, Jenny, that it starts very young. So when we're very young, we've often seen, and not to sort of dismiss what our parents or grandparents do, but we often say, well, this is what we do, this is our culture. And do we expose our children to different cultures? There's this strong defiance and dismissal of different traditions. But if we start exposing children since they're young, then I think that's something which they can carry forward into adulthood. But ethno-relativism, I think, is something which we all need to develop, where we stop dismissing and thinking. And there are other, you know, there are different norms. My norm is not the only norm. So accepting that there are many different norms.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. This week was St. Lucia Independence, with 45 years of independence. And there will be a number of events at the St. Lucia High Commission. And there was a lecture that was going to happen last night, and I was debating whether to go. And I found myself doubting whether this lecture was going to be, you know, intellectually stimulating for me, this person who'd flown over from St. Lucia, you know, from my, you know, the country of my heritage, etc. And I went there and I was blown away by the whole experience. Actually, it was like being immersed in St. Lucia in the middle of London. And it just reminded me, you know, seek wisdom from many different places. Don't think that we know it all. So just backing up your point there, really, here in a big way. So thank you very much. Obehi.
Hey, I love that comment from Latifa in the chat that says the cross-cultural individuals are an asset, which is exactly to Matra's point, that really the more nuance we have, more cultural adaptation we have from different places, it makes us better people. So provided we know that, then we can increase the curiosity. I don't expect people to go and learn every language, learn every culture, can't possibly do that. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the fact that we all have a default mode of being. We're who we are, and we're made up of all sorts of things. So to your point, Jenny, you're British, you were born here, your parents are from St. Lucia, heritage. So it's a melting pot of all sorts. Who you lived with at university would influence you as well. There are all these things that make us who we are, that we already have other cultures inbuilt in us already. What we're trying to get people to do or consider right now is cultural intelligence that allows us to just move one step beyond the emotional intelligence, which is I can empathize and see how someone might be feeling. Cultural intelligence is thinking, what part of your culture is allowing you to present the way you are? And how can I understand it a bit more so that I can help you more? In that case, that woman with the health issue, right? That could have helped more in that context. If, of course, she was in a very stressful situation, it might have been any other time she would have been more articulate with what she really wanted to say. So it's about that aspect of it. Default mode, we all have it, but there's no judgment here about whether you're this curious, to what degree you're curious. You got the life that you have and things are busy, right? But picking up the point from Martha said, and Martha loved it, when you said you're a good tourist. That's what I'd like to see you thinking about it. When we go on holiday to other countries and places, if we noted we're a little bit different there, we're more open. We're more aware of our surroundings. We're interested in people. We're interested in language. We say things like, oh, how do you say that again? Or how do you say please and thank you? We somehow find the opportunity or the motivation to be curious. But then when we go into our default, we shut that tap off for some reason. So what we're asking us to do in terms of the workplace is to think, how can I turn the tap on a little bit today? How can I turn it on this week? So like Jenny, how can I go, like, we only want to hear that guy talk, but okay, fine. That could be it. I'm going to turn up to some webinar that I have no business being in, but I kind of want to know what the lay of the land would be, what the cultural application, what the cultural awareness and knowledge would be. What kind of terminology do people use? Can I Google that and find out what does that mean really? Okay, so those are the kind of thing I wanted to just share there. It's the bias that we have, and those biases are normal, completely normal. What we always want to say is, have we used that bias to harm someone else? That's usually where it is, but having them is normal. So your bias, every time you get to know more and more of someone's culture or what makes them, what's important to them, your bias reduces. And that can only be a good thing, because your bias is also a form of protection. It says, is this person or is that culture safe for me? That's really what it's about. So when you realize I'm not in actual physical danger, then you can allow yourself to enjoy the pleasure of someone else's culture, what they mean, how they think, and how you can apply some of that to your own life, which is the point of sharing information. It is the point of sharing the food that we did in my teams. It was to share, oh, we don't cook rice like that. Anybody ever heard about the Ghanaian and Nigerian competition about jollof rice? It's a cultural conversation. It will go on for years. But it's a conversation about the fact that we cook it differently, even though it has the same name. Interesting. That's what I wanted to share there.
Thank you so much. There's a lot. There was a lot, and you're getting
There's
a
a
lot.
lot there.
You are all getting a lot of appreciation in the chat. I hope you can see that. Sadia, what would you like to add?
Why do we lack cultural intelligence? Coming back to what everybody said, is I think we've stopped being curious. And we, in the working world, we go into work and we do whatever hits our desks and we focus on that. And we don't necessarily make the space for anything else. And we need to start being curious again, like everybody has said, and be a tourist. I love Martha's tourist. And be a tourist in work, be a tourist outside work as well. You don't have to go abroad to be a tourist. And we do have to be curious about, as Abehi says, our default mode. What is our default mode? Challenge it, be curious about it. You know, ask yourself questions. Do I want to work with people that are different to me? Do you? What's your motivation? What's your why? Why do you want to work with people that are different to you? Are there benefits? Be curious about for yourself, but also look at your social circle, inside work and outside work. Because if you are mixing with people who have the same default mode as you outside of work and inside work, then you're not going to start being curious. Why would you be curious? There's nothing to be curious about, really. So be curious about who you're mixing with and try and expand that. And it's fun. You know, your social circle inside and outside work should be different, should be mixed. And that's what will cultivate more curiosity in a really natural way.
Thank you so much. As I've been listening to you, I've been thinking about the world of work and how it can feel like a certain type of person gets on. And therefore, it doesn't always feel like there's space. If it's all about achievement and, you know, I've got to push myself forward and get on, then actually, if I'm very collectivist and I want to say, oh, it's we, and yeah, you know, I don't put myself forward here. Everyone did it. We don't get on, do we? If your organization is about speaking up and you know, being very vocal, or sharing how you feel, and you're a person who actually, you know, you have a poker face, no one really knows what's going on, you know, no matter what, and that's culturally where you've come from. Again, people start saying, well, we don't know if we trust that person. because we can't read them. And for me, there's this thing which is really important, which is organizations creating a culture and a space for us to appreciate difference, as opposed to there's one way, and so let's all be that way, because I don't think that actually benefits even the majority group, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of people probably conforming there. Hira, did you want to say something on that?
No, nothing. I was
Just readying yourself for another question.
yes.
Fantastic. I'm actually going to jump around, and I'm going to ask this one to Sadia first. So how have you seen, or would you recommend leaders and staff to develop their cultural intelligence?
At first, why do they want to develop it and how they can develop it? But also the why is really important. Why is it important to them? On what they're going to role model. And my big thing here in developing cultural intelligence is to see it as fun, because it really is fun. All humans love to learn about other humans. I'd say do something different, one thing every single month to develop cultural intelligence. So that could be going to see a different film. It could be reading a different book. It could be going to the museum to seeing different things. There's so many things that you could do that's different. If you want to think differently and behave differently and ask different questions, then be different yourself. So start with yourself. Embrace the fact that being culturally intelligent is so beneficial and that you're on a journey to become that way. How can I be from today? How can I be a tourist today? How can I be more curious today? Just 2 questions to ask yourself, and role model being a tourist, role model being curious. Talk about the new film that you watch, that you've never watched, a Korean film. I know you were talking about before, Jenny, a Korean film before. Talk about all the different things that you watch. Make it conversational. And it's fun. It really, and also a family affair. We talked about children at school where they learn these things. So the education's brilliant at the moment, learning about different cultures. Find out what your children are learning. Ask them questions, learn from them, and just talk about it more. Talk about different things you wouldn't normally talk about. That will really help. And fun. Make it fun.
I love that. Obehi, what do you think? What can be done?
I think I loved Sadia's one about the fact it's why do you want to do it. So I think it's I don't expect people to just go and fake it through, like, okay, I want to increase my cultural intelligence, I'm going to start bombarding people with, oh, where are you from? What kind of, I don't do that. Like, no, this is about trying to think, well, what is the benefit to me? What will be the benefit to my team? Your leader, I think it's particularly important for you. Personal leaders, yes, it is. But for people who are leading other people in the team, who you might look at your team and say, actually, I do have multicultural people in my team from different places. They might be all British, but they have different heritage. And this might be a way to be able to connect them. Do you want to think what's the benefit? Is it to create more harmony in the team? Is it to communicate better? Is it for people to feel like they can connect better with each other? Because if they connect better, then they work together more, and people don't feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of protective around their work, whatever it is. To think about the team you do have, and then go wider with the broader team. And how can you bring people together? So I would always say, be curious, but start with your interest. I like the idea of the books and the movies and whatever you saw, because it's an easy thing to see. Did anybody see that thing last night? Or did anybody watch this thing? Oh my God, go and see it. Let's have a discussion about it. You can do that. There's an easy way to introduce conversation. Or being able to say, I watched a film, I watched an Indian film last night. I don't know how much of that is real cultural stuff or just made up to make the film. Could you talk to me about it? It's a great way to start conversation. Like, no, that's fake. That never happened. Maybe 100 years ago. But it's a great way to start conversation. So it's important that you are genuine in your interest. So be clear with yourself about why it's important to you. And you might not be interested now, because you might look at your team and say, it's not diverse, it's the same lot of people. So, but then start with asking questions, because even if they're all homogeneous and white, they might come from different parts of the UK that have culture attached to that. So use that as a starting point, a way to exercise and get used to asking cultural questions.
Brilliant, thank you. Over to you, Martha.
Yeah, I'll sort of go in another direction. I just thought of a colleague who was asked by a client, oh, have I been a bit like insensitive here? and they were shocked to hear that they had been. So asking for feedback, and not necessarily from your team, because there may not be enough safety to give it. So ask it from someone else who is there for your best interest and for your growth. And then use that as a starting point for reflection, maybe to go back into the team meeting and then be more aware of, how am I showing up as the team lead? What am I putting in the space that's creating a funk? Why am I getting so much silence from here? Why, and then you can go on to maybe building and having direct questions with some of your team members to really look at what would be appreciated, because you're showing vulnerability by showing that you've been doing some inner reflection before kind of opening up a space for a deeper conversation about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Hira, so your last thoughts on this. What would you recommend leaders and staff to do to develop their cultural intelligence?
Thank you, Jenny. So I definitely love the personal why element, which Sadia and Obehi both have discussed. Of course, knowing that when you are getting along with people from different cultures, there's a term called sustainable collaborative advantage. So if you are a person who gets along well with people from different diverse backgrounds, then you have at work what is called a sustainable collaborative advantage, which is a term not devised by me. It's devised by a professor. I think it was Professor Chuck or Shelton. I can give him the name later on, but it is obviously beneficial. And then embracing cultural humility, knowing that you don't have all the answers, and encouraging employees at work and even outside work not to apply their own frame of reference when examining different behaviors, practices, and styles. Rather than doing that, they should use the standards of the culture which is involved in the interaction. And just because a tradition or practice doesn't fall within the parameters of what others deem socially acceptable doesn't mean it's not valid. So judging things from from a Western point of view, or even from an Eastern perspective, because I can say I also came from a very sort of superiority perspective where I thought that things in my culture were much better. But then just appreciating and acknowledging that there are millions of people who do things differently. It's just being aware and respectful of other traditions that are not so mainstream. And again, I think Martha's point, feedback is amazing, because anonymous feedback can really help build create psychological safety. So getting that feedback again and again as to whether whatever you're doing is sitting well with the people or not, and not assuming, not generalizing, asking yourself this question: am I making any assumptions on the basis of gender, religion, faith, ethnicity? What am I not seeing? Is this the incomplete picture, or how could I view it differently?
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your points. There's a lot of food for thought here, and I hope people feel that they've heard some real practical actions as well. I think one of the things that is coming up is about safety a lot in the chat. And I know some of you have said, be careful if you don't feel safe. Do we need to wait to feel safe to take action? I'm curious about that, and I'd love anyone's perspective on it.
Well, if you're only focusing on what your mind is telling you, then you'll never be ready, is what I say. You'll always find an excuse to say, oh, I'm not feeling safe, not feeling safe. And that's why I work so much with the body. What does that actually mean? It's actually our skin is our largest organ, always picking up signals about what's going on. And I think a key thing is to encourage people to slow down so that you can pick up the valuable data about what is going on, and start to have conversations from there. So your whole body wisdom, rather than what your head is, saying to you. And I often encourage people to preface what they think is going on by saying, my mind says this.
Really
because there's so much more going on than what your mind is saying, so that you can have a much more expansive conversation and slowing it down. And then to notice what's happening, because if you're anxious, you're not feeling safe, your breath will change. You'll be tight. People know an uptight leader when they walk into the room. That doesn't create safety. So we have to be also responsible for how we show up. What energy are we putting out there that's going to kind of engender a more open conversation? Or are we coming in with this sort of bully energy that's going to shut it down?
Any other thoughts on safety?
And I think if you really want to be an ally or if you want to be culturally savvy, then there has to be some sort of risky advocacy involved because you have to understand this that you will not always know about all the cultures. And that's all right. You will make mistakes, and that's absolutely fine too. But are you showing compassionate understanding when you make those mistakes, or are you willing to do better once you've made that mistake? So, understanding cultures is something which none of us may truly ever master because there's so many different cultures we're exposed to, and if we are waiting to be safe, if you're waiting for that right moment, then we'll never be able to nurture relationships because we'll always be waiting for the right moment or to say the right thing, which is frankly never going to happen. So we need to go out there and we need to take the risks, but do it in a way in which we try and understand the other person, from an empathetic point of view.
Absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that. Now, we've had lots of comments. A lot of these are not necessarily questions. They're sort of comments from others, but I'll just try and see if I can find any of the questions here. I think we did work a little bit around this, but this idea of how do we teach our staff to be curious and to be a tourist? Is there any more anyone wants to say on that? I know Sadia gave lots of examples.
No, but I would want to say, I think that you do have to start with yourself first, and you do it, then they'd mirror you, they'd copy you. So the idea that you can do training, there are plenty of cultural intelligence training. Jenny does them, so it's not like you can't do them. But what we're trying to do is, as a leader, you start first, right? And then you talk about this with your team, and they in turn would start to mirror you. And because it increases safety. That's the conversation in which they can do this together, knowing that they might make mistakes. I think that's the thing that came up. The safety is you will make mistakes. That's guaranteed. It's right. How do you recover from the mistakes? It's okay. We all put our foot in it one time or another. It's how to apologize quickly. We don't have to justify it. I'm sorry, mea culpa. And then you put your hand up and you move on and you do the next thing, you make another mistake. But the idea that you're going to be fearful of it. So start with yourself, make the mistake in front of everybody, adjust to it. They will do the same thing. I hope that answered that question, Andy.
Lovely. I want to just ask, I want to ask a question around leveraging this difference. So some people have said, I come from multiple identities, I don't have one culture. Just any sort of top tips on leveraging that position?
I think there's different models that have been out in the world about put your red hat on, blue hat on, whatever. And I think if you establish yourself as saying, well, actually today I'm going to put my Caribbean hat on, and this is what I'll tell you about that idea. Do you know what I mean? So you're being playful, you're being explicit about the perspective where you're coming from, and people go, oh, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, and I love that. I just love that example, Martha. Thank you so much. And also, I think letting people know about your different cultural identities and what you bring to the table. There's this concept of the Johari window, Jenny, as you would know, we explain in our programs that, if you expose that part of your identity, if you keep it hidden, then people would never know how to leverage it. But if you share what you bring to the table, then only people will know how to best make use of it. So making people aware of what that background is and sharing it will make a difference.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And just on that, I think also asking yourself a question, when you've got different hats and you're looking at something, ask yourself a question wearing different hats and see what comes up. Because when you ask yourself more questions, you will ask other people more questions too.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think we'll end on that. I can see, Rob, you asked a very big question. I feel like the answer is to break it down and start doing the small things. I think when you've got a massive problem, what do they say? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that would be, I think, because of that massive question you asked, that would be where I'd start, one bite at a time. And some of the things that we've suggested, hopefully, will be mouthfuls. I really hope. So I hope you found that useful today. I think we'd love to know, what are your key takeaways? Please do feel free to type them in the chat. What have you taken from today's discussion? Has it answered your question about how you can be more culturally intelligent? Has it answered your question about whether you are currently culturally intelligent? Has it helped you think about how you can actually start to help someone else be more culturally intelligent. I want to thank you so much for attending today. I want to particularly say a huge thank you to Hira, Martha, Sadia, and Obehi. As I've said, you can find out more about them in the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, a directory which connects corporate organizations with coaches from global minority or ethnically diverse backgrounds. Please do look them up in the directory, share that directory in your place of work so you can make sure you have diverse coaches to choose from. And I can vouch for each and every one of them personally. They're amazing coaches who I would go to personally. So to find out about more the work we do, you can go to jennygarrett.global and you could sign up for our newsletter or even purchase my book. Our next session is going to be very exciting. It's going to be on the 28th of March, and instead of being on Zoom, it's going to be on a LinkedIn Live. And it's going to be about taking an intersectional approach to helping all women thrive in the workplace. So the best way to actually find out about it is to go to the Diverse Executive Coach Directory LinkedIn page. That's the best place to go. Yes, I think Tanya sent you the event. She's brilliant. So you can go into the chat and you can click on the link and you can make sure that you're signed up for it. So it's not via Eventbrite this time, it's via this link. And we're looking forward to seeing you on LinkedIn Live for a very different experience. Also, my colleague Tanya will be adding in the chat a survey. Please let us know your experience of today's webinar and what else you'd like to see from us. As you know, we run these monthly, so we're always happy to hear new ideas, new insights, and what will be most useful to you. So thank you. Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you all very, 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 very much. Oh, we finished on time. Take care, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And thank you all so much for sharing your takeaways as well from the session. Glad that you took something away that's going to be useful for you in the workplace. See you soon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Is it big time yet?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Take a quickie.
Bye, everyone.
People are still there.
Yeah, we're still recording.
Yeah. And remember, your different cultures are your superpowers.
Absolutely.